I want you to feel the weight of every moment you've silenced your voice to avoid conflict. Every time you've said yes when your soul was screaming no. In every instance you've shrunk yourself to fit into someone else's version of who you should be. Now, I want you to imagine that weight dissolving as if you're shedding layers of invisible chains wrapped around your mind, your body, and your spirit. Because here's the truth: being nice isn't the same as being kind, and it certainly isn't the same as being true to yourself. From a young age, many women are conditioned to believe that being nice is one of their greatest assets. They're taught to smile politely, to avoid confrontation, to agree, even when they disagree, and to put the comfort of others above their own needs. This conditioning isn't always explicit. It's often woven into compliments like, "You're such a good girl," or warnings like, "No one likes a difficult woman." Over time, these messages become internalized, and niceness transforms from a behavior into an identity. But here's the truth: being nice and being kind are not the same thing. Niceness is often rooted in fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not being loved or accepted. Kindness, on the other hand, is born from strength. It's a conscious choice, not a reflexive reaction. When a woman operates from a place of niceness, she tends to prioritize external validation over internal alignment. She becomes hyper-aware of how others perceive her, constantly scanning the room for approval, acceptance, and reassurance. This creates a cycle where her self-worth becomes dependent on external factors: how others respond to her, how many people like her, or how often she's praised for her accommodating nature. But the cost of this behavior is high. Every time she suppresses her opinions to avoid conflict, every time she tolerates disrespect to keep the peace, and every time she overextends herself to meet unrealistic expectations, she sacrifices a small piece of her authenticity. Niceness often comes with an emotional price tag: resentment. When a woman repeatedly says yes when she wants to say no, or agrees to things she doesn't believe in, she begins to build quiet resentment, not just toward others, but also toward herself. She might not even realize it at first, because niceness often comes with an added layer of guilt. If she sets boundaries or speaks her mind, she's plagued with thoughts like, "Am I being selfish?" or "What if they think I'm rude?" This guilt keeps her trapped in the cycle, convincing her that being agreeable is the only way to maintain her value in relationships, workplaces, in society at large. But kindness is different. Kindness isn't about pleasing everyone or making sure no one is ever uncomfortable. It's about showing up with integrity, with genuine compassion, and with respect for both others and yourself. As a kind woman knows that she can be empathetic without being a doormat. She understands that her voice deserves space in every conversation, that her needs are just as important as anyone else's, and that her worth isn't defined by her ability to keep everyone around her happy. Kindness isn't passive, it's active. It's the ability to say no without guilt, to communicate boundaries with love, and to offer help from a place of genuine willingness rather than obligation. At its core, redefining niceness and embracing kindness requires a mindset shift. It asks a woman to question her motivations. Am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't? This question becomes a guiding light, a way to differentiate between actions born from authenticity and those born from fear. When a woman chooses to act from a place of kindness rather than niceness, she begins to reclaim her personal power. She no longer bends herself into shapes that make others comfortable. Instead, she stands firm in her truth while still showing up with compassion and care. This shift also requires a deeper understanding of self-respect. Niceness often lacks self-respect because it places the opinions and comfort of others above one's own well-being. But kindness thrives on self-respect. It's rooted in the belief that your feelings, your opinions, and your boundaries are valid not because someone else validates them, but because you do. A kind woman doesn't allow herself to be mistreated in the name of being agreeable. She doesn't silence her voice just to keep the peace. She understands that her presence in any space is valuable, and she doesn't have to shrink herself to prove her worth. The world often rewards niceness in the short term, but it respects kindness in the long term. People may take advantage of a nice woman because they sense her fear of rejection or confrontation, but they respect a kind woman because they see her clarity, her strength, and her unwavering sense of self. This isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling, it's about becoming clear about your boundaries, clear about your values, and clear about the energy you're willing to give to others. So, redefining niceness and embracing kindness also means letting go of the fear of being disliked. The truth is, no matter how nice you are, not everyone will like you, and that's okay. A kind woman doesn't measure her worth by how many people approve of her. She knows that her value isn't tied to external opinions, but to her own sense of integrity and alignment. The journey from niceness to kindness isn't always easy. It requires unlearning deeply ingrained patterns, questioning long-held beliefs, and confronting fears of rejection or disapproval. But every step taken in this direction brings a woman closer to her true self, a self that is free, authentic, and unapologetically real. When she stops confusing niceness for kindness, she stops performing and she becomes someone who doesn't just exist to make others comfortable, but thrives in her truth, radiating a strength that inspires others to do the same. Setting boundaries is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood acts of self-respect. For many women, the very idea of establishing limits feels uncomfortable, foreign, or even selfish. Society has long conditioned women to be accommodating, agreeable, and endlessly available. So they're taught to prioritize others' needs over their own, to feel responsible for everyone else's comfort, and to keep the peace at all costs. But the truth is, without boundaries, there can be no authentic connection, only resentment, exhaustion, and a slow erosion of self-worth. Boundaries are not walls, they are guidelines. They are not about shutting people out. They are about creating space for healthier, more meaningful interactions. A boundary is simply an invisible line that defines what is and isn't acceptable in your life. It communicates where your emotional, physical, and mental limits lie. And yet, many women struggle to set these lines because they fear the consequences, rejection, disappointment, or being labeled as difficult. The first step in setting clear boundaries is recognizing your right to have them. You have the right to protect your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. You have the right to say no without guilt and to walk away from situations or people that consistently disrespect your limits. These rights are not privileges, they are fundamental to your self-respect and emotional health. But why is it so hard for many women to assert these rights? The answer often lies in deeply ingrained beliefs. Many women equate boundary setting with being unkind, selfish, or unlovable. And they fear that saying no will drive people away, that asserting themselves will ruin relationships, or that their worth is tied to their ability to meet everyone else's needs. These fears are powerful, but they are also illusions. Healthy boundaries don't push people away, they filter out those who are only there to take advantage of your lack of limits. Boundaries are not just about saying no, they are also about saying yes to what truly matters. When you set boundaries, you free up your time and energy for the people, activities, and goals that align with your values. You stop pouring yourself into bottomless cups and start investing in areas that replenish you. Boundaries are an act of prioritization, and prioritizing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. One of the most challenging aspects of setting boundaries is overcoming the fear of disappointing others. People who have benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist when you start enforcing them. They might react with anger, guilt tripping, or emotional manipulation. This resistance can feel deeply uncomfortable, but it's also a sign that your boundaries are working. People who respect you will adjust. People who are only there for what they could take from you will fall away. Another key aspect of setting boundaries is consistency. A boundary is only as effective as your commitment to enforcing it. It's not enough to declare your limits, you must also be prepared to stand by them when they're tested. This requires courage because standing firm in your boundaries often means facing uncomfortable conversations, potential conflict, or temporary disapproval. But the discomfort of enforcing a boundary is far less damaging than the long-term pain of living without them. Language plays a crucial role in boundary setting. Many women soften their boundaries with apologetic language, like saying, "I'm so sorry, but I can't," or "I hope you don't mind, but I need to." These phrases dilute the power of your boundary and send the message that you feel guilty for asserting your needs. Clear and confident language is essential. Phrases like "I'm not available for that," or "that doesn't work for me," or direct yet respectful. You don't owe long explanations or justifications for your boundaries. Your comfort and well-being are reason enough. It's also important to understand that boundaries are not just external, they are internal as well. Internal boundaries involve recognizing your own triggers, managing your emotions, and taking responsibility for your reactions. But for example, if someone repeatedly crosses the line you've set, an internal boundary might involve deciding not to engage with them emotionally. Internal boundaries are about protecting your mental and emotional space, even when external circumstances are beyond your control. Boundaries also extend into your relationship with yourself. Often the most violated boundaries are the ones we neglect internally. If you've promised yourself rest, but you keep overcommitting, that's a boundary violation. But if you've decided to avoid certain toxic behaviors or environments, but keep returning to them, that's a boundary violation. Honoring boundaries isn't just about holding others accountable, it's about holding yourself accountable too. When you set boundaries, something transformative happens. You begin to teach people how to treat you, not through your words alone, but through your actions. You show them that your time, energy, and emotional space are valuable, and you expect them to treat them as such. But more importantly, you teach yourself that you are worthy of respect, care, and protection. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you start caring about yourself too. It means recognizing that your needs, feelings, and well-being are just as important as anyone else's. It means stepping out of the role of the eternal giver and allowing yourself to receive, not just from others, but from yourself. Boundaries are not about creating distance, they are about creating clarity. They allow you to show up in your relationships, your work, and your life with authenticity and confidence. And while setting them might feel uncomfortable at first, the freedom, peace, and self-respect they bring are worth. Seeking external validation is one of the most deeply ingrained patterns many women carry, often without realizing it. From a young age, girls are subtly conditioned to measure their worth based on how others perceive them, whether it's through compliments, approval from authority figures, or societal praise for being agreeable and accommodating. Over time, this reliance on external validation becomes so deeply embedded that it starts to shape behavior, decision-making, and even self-identity. The need to be liked, accepted, or admired becomes a driving force, and every action is filtered through the question, what will they think of me? At its core, external validation is about seeking reassurance. It's about looking outward for a sense of worthiness instead of finding it within. A woman who relies on external validation may find herself constantly second-guessing her decisions, fearing disapproval, and altering her behavior to match what she believes others expect from her. This cycle is exhausting because it's a pursuit with no finish line. Approval from others may provide temporary relief, but it's fleeting. The moment one source of validation fades, the craving for the next hit begins. One of the most common manifestations of this pattern is the inability to say no. A woman who fears losing approval might overcommit herself, agree to things she doesn't want to do, or tolerate behavior she finds unacceptable, all because she's afraid of being seen as rude, selfish, or unlikable. This kind of people-pleasing behavior is a trap because it trades short-term comfort for long-term dissatisfaction. Each time she silences her true feelings to maintain someone else's approval, she chips away at her authenticity and self-respect. Social media has amplified this dynamic. In today's world, validation is quantified. Likes, comments, shares, and followers serve as visible metrics of perceived worth. So many women find themselves curating their lives, editing their personalities, and filtering their realities to present an image that will be widely accepted and admired. But this external approval often feels hollow because it doesn't address the root of the issue, the lack of internal validation. At the heart of this struggle is fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough. But the truth is, no amount of external approval can ever fill the void left by a lack of self-acceptance. External validation is like trying to fill a bottomless cup. It doesn't matter how much you pour in, it will never be enough. The only lasting solution is to shift the focus inward and start validating yourself. Self-validation begins with self-awareness. It requires paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, and your internal dialogue. When you make a decision, instead of asking, will they approve, ask yourself, does this align with my values? Does this make me proud of myself? Does this feel true to who I am? These questions act as a compass, guiding you back to your own inner voice. Building internal validation also requires breaking the habit of comparison. Comparing yourself to others, whether it's their achievements, appearance, or lifestyle, is one of the quickest ways to undermine your self-worth. It creates an illusion that everyone else is more successful, more attractive, or more loved. But comparison is inherently flawed because it's based on incomplete information. You see someone else's highlight reel, but you compare it to your behind-the-scenes struggles. Affirmations and self-talk are powerful tools in this journey. The way you speak to yourself matters. If your internal dialogue is filled with criticism, doubt, and harsh judgment, it will reinforce the belief that you need external approval to feel good about yourself. But if you practice speaking to yourself with kindness, encouragement, and compassion, you begin to build a foundation of self-trust. Over time, this trust becomes unshakable. Another critical aspect of breaking free from external validation is embracing imperfection. Perfectionism often goes hand in hand with the need for approval. Many women believe that if they can just be perfect, if they can look perfect, act perfect, and achieve perfectly, then they'll finally earn the validation they crave. But perfection is an impossible standard, and chasing it only leads to frustration and burnout. With true confidence comes from accepting yourself as you are, flaws and all, and understanding that your worth isn't tied to your ability to meet unrealistic expectations. Boundaries also play a role in reducing reliance on external validation. When you have clear boundaries, you don't allow others' opinions to dictate your self-worth. You become selective about whose opinions you value and whose approval you seek. Not every opinion deserves a seat at your table, and not every critic deserves your attention. It's also important to celebrate your own victories, no matter how small. When you achieve something, whether it's completing a task, reaching a goal, or simply showing up for yourself, take a moment to acknowledge it. Don't wait for someone else to applaud you. Be your own cheerleader. Recognize your efforts, honor your progress, and remind yourself that you are enough exactly as you are. The journey from external validation to self-validation is not a quick or linear process. It requires patience, consistency, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about your fears and insecurities. But with every step you take, you move closer to freedom. Freedom from the exhausting need to please everyone. Freedom from the anxiety of wondering what others think of you. Freedom to live a life that feels true, fulfilling, and unapologetically your own. When a woman stops seeking external validation and starts validating herself, she becomes unstoppable. Her confidence isn't fragile because it's no longer dependent on the fleeting opinions of others. Her sense of self isn't shaken by criticism because she knows her worth comes from within. And most importantly, she begins to show up in the world as her true self, not a version curated for approval, but a version rooted in authenticity, clarity, and self-respect. Embracing authenticity is one of the most powerful yet challenging journeys a woman can undertake. In a world constantly pushing curated images, unattainable ideals, and societal expectations, being your true self is often met with resistance both externally and internally. Women are frequently taught to play roles: the perfect partner, the selfless mother, the accommodating employee, or the effortlessly attractive individual. These roles create a performance, a mask worn to gain acceptance, avoid judgment, or fit into predefined boxes. But the cost of this performance is immense. Every time a woman suppresses her true self to meet external expectations, she loses a piece of her identity, her voice, and her power. Authenticity begins with self-awareness. It's about peeling back the layers of conditioning, social programming, and limiting beliefs to rediscover who you truly are beneath it all. It requires asking difficult questions. What do I really want? What do I truly believe? Am I making choices that align with my values, or am I simply following a script handed to me by someone else? These questions are not easy to answer because they often reveal uncomfortable truths. They might expose relationships, jobs, or lifestyles that no longer serve you but have been maintained out of fear, guilt, or a desire to please others. At its core, authenticity is about honesty with yourself and with others. It means showing up as you are without apology, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means expressing your true feelings instead of suppressing them to avoid conflict. It means speaking your truth even if your voice shakes. And most importantly, it means letting go of the need to be universally liked. Not everyone will understand or accept your authentic self, and that's okay. And authenticity isn't about pleasing everyone, it's about aligning with yourself. The fear of rejection is one of the biggest barriers to authenticity. Many women hesitate to be fully themselves because they worry about being judged, criticized, or abandoned. This fear is valid. Authenticity does come with risks. When you show your true self, you also expose your vulnerabilities. But vulnerability is not weakness, it's courage in its rawest form. It's the willingness to be seen, to be known, and to be real, even when there's a chance of rejection. There's also the societal expectation placed on women to remain agreeable and accommodating, even at the expense of their own truth. A woman who asserts herself, expresses her boundaries, or confidently shares her opinions is often labeled as difficult or intimidating. These labels are weapons used to discourage authenticity, but they lose their power when you stop seeking approval from those who misunderstand you. Being authentic might mean walking away from people, environments, or systems that require you to shrink yourself to fit in. Authenticity also requires self-compassion. Many women hold themselves to impossible standards, believing that they need to be perfect to be worthy of love, respect, or success. But true authenticity means embracing your imperfections, your flaws, and your humanity. It means understanding that you are not defined by your mistakes, your failures, or the opinions of others. Self-compassion allows you to give yourself the same kindness, patience, and forgiveness you would offer to a close friend. One of the most profound shifts happens when you stop performing and start connecting. Authenticity attracts authenticity. When you show up as your true self, you create space for others to do the same. You invite deeper connections, more meaningful relationships, and genuine trust. People can feel when someone is being real with them. It's magnetic, it's refreshing, and it's rare. Inauthenticity, on the other hand, creates distance. People might like the version of you that fits their expectations, but they'll never truly know you. Living authentically also means embracing your passions, interests, and desires without shame or hesitation. Many women suppress their dreams or water down their goals because they fear judgment or failure. But authenticity requires giving yourself permission to pursue the things that light you up, regardless of whether others understand or approve. It means owning your quirks, celebrating your uniqueness, and refusing to apologize for the things that make you you. Another critical aspect of authenticity is emotional honesty. Many women are taught to hide or minimize their emotions to avoid being seen as too sensitive or too emotional, but your emotions are not liabilities, they are signals. They tell you when something feels right, when something feels wrong, and when something needs your attention. Ignoring or suppressing these signals disconnects you from yourself. Being emotionally honest means allowing yourself to feel your feelings fully without judgment and expressing them in healthy, constructive ways. Authenticity also demands presence, about being fully engaged in the moment rather than constantly worrying about how you're being perceived. When you're truly present, you're not strategizing how to impress others or filtering your words to avoid judgment. You're simply being. This level of presence requires letting go of the constant need to perform, perfect, or control every outcome. It's important to recognize that authenticity is not a destination, it's a daily practice. Every interaction, every decision, and every conversation offers an opportunity to choose authenticity over performance. But some days it will feel easy, and other days it will feel incredibly hard. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, question your choices, or feel the pull to slip back into old patterns of people pleasing and self-censorship. But each time you choose authenticity, you reinforce your relationship with yourself. And ultimately, authenticity is about liberation. It's about freeing yourself from the exhausting cycle of trying to be everything for everyone. It's about breaking free from the invisible chains of expectation, fear, and self-doubt. When a woman chooses to embrace her authenticity, she steps into her power, not because she's trying to prove anything to anyone, but because she's finally at peace with herself. She no longer seeks external permission to exist fully, boldly, and unapologetically. She knows that her worth isn't conditional, and her voice matters not because it's loud or agreeable, but because it's hers.